I was driving back home with my girlfriend at the time. It was Christmas Eve, and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family, but she got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of adult beverages. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave, therefore I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 p.m. or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along Highway 211. Now this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit. But nothing to fear. I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The both of us were just driving and talking away, just two young lovers making the most of our moment together. There is a portion of the highway that descends an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road are thick forests. There are no lights. The only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drive down the hill, cross the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway starts to flatten out that it happens. Something sprints across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slam on the brakes. I turn to my girlfriend and ask her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of the car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dart out in front of cars, not like that anyway. So for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turn the car around and switch on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had vanished in. I step out of the car and walk towards the woods. I don't see anything, but now it feels like perhaps I'd made a grave error. My heart is pounding, and the hairs on the back of my neck are standing at full attention. But I still don't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly the car's horn blasts. It's not a beep, beep, beep that you'd get if, say, your driver or passenger wanted you to hurry up and get in the car. No, this was a long, blaring bep. I walk back into the car and ask my girlfriend why she leaned on the horn like that. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely this was the thing that ran in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud, and in one of his hands he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us, and then he smiled and waved to us just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. While I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest beyond my car headlights. My girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye, and that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if making to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home, but they never found anybody, or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. The man was looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently, so I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet, but I can tell you that I'm extra vigilant now, especially near Deep Creek. To preface this, I love to drive, like hours-long drives to nowhere with no destination in mind, just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in Nebraska, I'd often take back roads or lonely highways cutting through the countryside to small towns and eventually cities, and I'd usually take these drives at night since there was less traffic to worry about. I've done it since I had my license 4 or 5 years ago, and I've never once had any sort of issue, nor have I ever run into any trouble. That was until a few nights ago. For reference, I'm a relatively small 22-year-old female, and as I've stated before, I often take these drives entirely and utterly alone. They're a good way to clear my head when I'm stressed, upset, or overwhelmed, or for me to get a plan together to sort personal issues out. I've also done these long and lonely drives to get away from the toxicity of my household when I used to live with my parents as a means of coping with their alcoholism, though now that I've moved out and am in a much better place mentally, I don't have the urge to get in my car and just drive anymore. However, on the night this event took place, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious with a clusterfuck of personal issues I'd rather not get into. I felt restless and irritable around my boyfriend, couldn't focus on anything else, and decided I would take a drive to clear my head. My boyfriend was understanding and told me to be careful and not be gone for too long, since it was getting pretty late. I agreed, kissed him goodbye, and left. I drove around our city for about 30 minutes, but I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life. Hence, I decided to go further north down those familiar, dark, winding one-lane highways. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour, taking the turns at a slower pace in case a deer jumped out around the bend, and was just admiring the vast empty darkness of the snow-capped fields and barren trees. It was honestly a bit creepy being all alone with no cars in sight, in seemingly the middle of nowhere, the few houses miles back from the road lightless, and the dead cornfields withered away and covered in the snow. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I half expected to see a ghost pop up in my rearview mirror, or see someone clamber out from the patches of trees dotting the horizon. The only light came from my headlights, and even then I still strained to see through the inky darkness of the night. By now it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made the familiar roundabout that would either take you to a small town or back up towards the city, I would head back to the city and home. That roundabout was still maybe 25 minutes away, but other than my imagination picturing the worst, I wasn't all that concerned. I mean, I was by myself. I didn't have any other motorists to worry about, right? Wrong. As I'm rounding another bend, I notice a vehicle with its hazards flashing maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. It was some sort of sedan, dark-colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder while the rest was jutted out onto the road like they had to pull over in a hurry, but didn't quite manage to do that. The driver's side door was flung wide open, and as I slowed my vehicle down and angled it towards the opposite side of the road to pass, I could make out what looked like maybe blood on the inside of the open door. I didn't see anyone on the road or in the car, and I was the only motorist in sight. Cell phone reception is spotty at best in this part of the country, but more often than not, you couldn't get reception no matter how hard you prayed, which was the case when I took a glance at my phone to see if I had any service. So, a lone female on the road at night, pulling up near a vacant vehicle that looks like someone had been attacked on the inside with no cell service. Now, I'm no dummy. I've watched countless episodes of Investigation Discovery and Criminal Minds and read far too many true crime books to know that this had bad and danger written all over it. But there was still a small part of me that worried something terrible had happened to whoever was in that vehicle, and I thought I needed to help. These roads don't get a lot of traffic late at night, and temperatures were well below freezing. If someone was hurt or in trouble, there was no one and nothing else to help them but me. Still, I erred on the side of caution. I was still driving my car, though a bit more slowly, and as I approached the vehicle, I rolled down my passenger window a bit, shut off the music, and called out, "Hey, anyone there? Are you okay?" I didn't hear a response. I worried they were passed out somewhere, but I wasn't about to get out and look for them. I told myself I'd call out one last time, and if I didn't hear anything, I would leave, and the moment there was reception, I'd call it in. And if I did hear someone, well, I'd figure out my next course of action then. So again I shout, "Hey, what happened? Are you okay?" There was silence for a beat, and then I heard rustling in the shadows of the trees, followed by a gruff voice saying, "Yeah." I was relieved at first, and was about to say something in response or possibly even stop my car and get out, when I noticed three things nearly simultaneously. As I inched my way past the front of the sedan, I noticed there was no damage to the hood or anywhere else on the vehicle, which I found to be strange considering the blood on the inside of the door. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glance of someone coming out from behind the sedan, and they were making their way toward my car, fast. The person did not have any blood on them or appeared injured in any way, wearing a mask, not like a face mask for COVID or a ski mask or anything normal, but one of those masks you would see in the Purge movies, and they were holding something in their hand. I don't know what it was, I couldn't get a good look, but from its length and shape my guess was maybe a tire iron or a crowbar or something. I don't need to tell you that I slammed on the gas the moment I noticed those things and drove like a bat straight out of hell, my heart thundering in my chest and my entire body shaking. My window was still rolled down in my haste, and the music was still shut off, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me, though I had no clue what they were saying. I just knew I had to get out of there immediately. I stole one last look in my rearview mirror as I drove away, mostly to see if they were getting in their sedan to follow the chase, or if they had stopped. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road watching me, and right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a second man emerge from the trees that had been rustling earlier, also wearing one of those creepy masks and no trace of blood on him. I probably broke every law for speeding that night, but I wanted to get as far away from those men as possible. As soon as I made it to the roundabout, I turned towards town, parked in the Walmart parking lot that thankfully still had cars from who I assumed were workers closing up shop, and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown. When I could pull myself together, I called one of my friends, T, who was a police officer, to tell him what happened and what I should do. He was concerned for me, and after asking if I was okay, where I was, did they follow me, etc., he told me since it was out of city limits he couldn't do much on his end, but he could get in contact with the local police sheriff in that jurisdiction to take my statement and check it out. I agreed, thanked him, and while I waited for the police to show up, I called my boyfriend. Through my hysterical sobs and panic, I managed to tell him what happened not even 10 or so minutes ago. He was, as you could imagine, super freaked for my safety and wanted me to either come home immediately or drive down himself to take me home. I told him the police were on their way to take my statement, so I couldn't leave and that I was okay. But I stayed on the phone with him until I saw the familiar police cruisers pulling into the lot. I gave the police my statement and they assured me they would go back to the spot I told them the sedan had been to take a look, and that they would try to catch the guys who did it. Though with no cameras and no description of the men, I wasn't sure they'd be able to. I didn't even get the license plate number, though. At the time of my panic, the thought never came to mind until the police were asking if I got it. All they had to go off of was a dark-colored sedan and 2 guys with masks. After I gave my statement, I went home and stayed curled up close to my boyfriend the whole night, listening to every sound the house made, in fear it would be those guys arriving any minute to finish whatever it was they started. Since the incident, I haven't heard back from the police about whether or not they have any leads, and I'm not sure they ever will. I'm just thankful I'm still here, and that I didn't stop my car or get out. I'm not sure what would have become of me if I had. I still have so many questions that have no answers. What were they doing? Why? Was that blood on the inside of the car or just a ruse to get more attention? If it was blood, did they hurt someone else? What would have happened to me if I had stopped my car? When I was a 17-year-old moody teenager, I had a big argument with my mom one night about how she just didn't understand my needs, and stormed out of the house. I was going to go for a walk, but it was freezing outside and dark, so I did a quick walk of shame past my mom and grabbed my car keys, giving her a quick explanation of going on a Macca's run, before storming out yet again, giving the door a nice slam on my way. I jumped in my old and crappy bright red Suzuki Swift and cranked the heat, which made the engine screaming in protest. I turned my angry teen music up and pulled out onto the dark streets. I drove to McDonald's in about 10 minutes and decided I was too mad to eat, and to calm down, I would go on a nice drive. Just down the road, another 15 minutes was a stretch of pitch-black, windy road that had lots of hairpin corners as it ran down a massive gorge to a small lake with a single-lane bridge going across it. If that doesn't sound scary enough, the road was called the Galston Gorge. Fun facts, and you can Google this road, it's in Sydney, Australia. James Gibson's camera was found on this road. He was one of Yvonne Milat's victims, the dude Wolf Creek was inspired by, and one of Australia's worst serial killers. So it has a pretty creepy background, and therefore is completely deserted at night. As I was making my way down the gorge, which is a road I know very well as I learned to drive on it with my mum, she took me a lot at night to learn night driving on a difficult road. I turned a hairpin corner, and as my headlights swung around, it lit up the road ahead, and I saw a black medium-shaped object in the middle of the road. It made me jump, but I assumed it was just a dead kangaroo. As I continued ahead, the closer I got to this object, I realized as I was almost on top of it that it was a baby car seat with the front covered in a blanket. I hit my brakes and my car screamed in protest even louder. I sat in my seat, staring at this baby seat, clenching my steering wheel. No way I was getting out when it was probably just a broken and dumped booster seat. I was about to pull off when I heard a noise. I turned my music down, but the sound of my shitty car engine made it hard to locate or recognize the noise. I wound my window down an inch and listened. It was a fucking baby crying. No, crying is an understatement. This poor thing was screaming. I threw my seatbelt off and unlocked my door, grabbing the handle. Then I froze. Out of the corner of my eye in the bush, I thought I saw something move. It was just out of reach of the light from my headlights. I took my hand off the door slowly and sat back in my seat thinking. I remember my mom telling me to never stop my car at night, that if I see something that requires help, then to move on and call for professional help, because there's nothing that requires the help of a moody, short little blonde girl who can barely carry her school bag. A baby needs my help, a tiny, defenseless baby. What if that was a wild animal I saw in the trees coming to have a meal out of this little thing? I thought before I opened my car door. As I did, my car let out a screech, causing whatever it was in the trees to jump. I slammed my door closed, jumped back in, and sped up the road. I got a few hairpins back up the gorge before pulling out my phone. Still, no signal as I'm driving in a literal hole. I raced up to the top and back into busy streets, then called for the police. I told them what I saw, and they told me to go home immediately, not to stop whatsoever, to keep my doors locked, and they would call me tomorrow, but not to worry. The next morning, Hornsby police called me thanking me for my report. They said a group of men have been placing baby seats in the middle of empty roads, covering them with a blanket that hides a speaker playing the sounds of children in distress to try and lure young women out of their cars. They then drag these women away and take advantage of them and beat them, then driving away in the women's car, leaving their victim to die in the bushes. They checked out the gorge, but the people had left. They left in such a rush they forgot the blue baby blanket with little gray elephants on it that I had described to the police as the one covering the baby seat. They said I was clever to keep going and to never get out of my car late at night, no matter what tries to stop me. That's all we got from today's stories. Let me know what you thought of each individual story. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe because you would not want to miss the next story the Haunted Sketchbook got in store for you.